Probably the big win of the original Disneyland is an attraction that many of us take for granted today. The Jungle Cruise is one of the most documented attractions of the 50s. And I believe it's because this was the first big attraction for adults. This was the original idea that I think that birthed all of the different movie rides that would show up in decades to come. The Jungle Cruise gave adults a sense of, here's the vacation you've always dreamed on going, here's an adventure that you've always dreamed of taking, and you can now do it not too far from where you live. Taking a photo that you did the Jungle Cruise was like, I went, I did it. So Adventureland was probably, I would say, the opening day home to the most popular attraction, which was the Jungle Cruise. I do have to say that I believe the opening day version of Adventureland, when there wasn't so much actually going on around it, there was no Swiss Family Robinson house, it had a grandiose entryway. It looked a little bit more adventurous. We had to lose some of this valuable property for Indiana Jones, for the treehouse to come in. So without all of those neighbors there, the opening way of the Jungle Cruise was way more of an experience. It's funny to see the barren Jungle Cruise. It's not nearly as overgrown. Like today, it feels very much like a real jungle. As a fun fact, you go around two different islands. One island is named after Catalina Island and the other one named after Manhattan. Each island symbolizing both the east and west of America, but the idea of east meets west. But when you see these boats coming through, this just had to blow people away in the time period. I do love seeing it from different shots. It really gives you an idea of just the amount of scale that Disney was able to put into this attraction. Because after all, this is when they were building key attractions inside the berm. That is something that has changed in the years when we would get Pirates, Haunted Mansion, Indiana Jones, Splash Mountain, all of its neighbors. But this was built inside of the park, and they really gave it a massive footprint that's been scaled back a little bit over the years. Oh, who's that guy riding the boat? Who's that skipper? But important to note, this is not only the beginning of making rides for the whole family that also skew to where an adult can enjoy them, but this is the beginning of the Disneyland rock work. But Jungle Cruise would bring in the idea of putting rock work into Disneyland and also the bend in the road. Like you're going over a pretty small parcel of land, but you go back and forth so many different times that it makes it feel bigger, way more grandiose than what the actual footprint is. So getting to go on a cruise through the jungle to see these slightly animated figures, it had to just be such an amazing opportunity for people of that time. And largely, other than adding in the Mark Davis scenes, a little bit of editing out the footprint for the invention of Indiana Jones, it's still pretty much the same attraction today than it was back then. Although, back then, the skippers weren't trying to be funny. It was actually more themed like you were inside of a nature documentary. Why is that zebra sleeping? Because the idea was this was supposed to feel like a Disney documentary, which Disney documentaries, their nature documentaries, was a big part of their TV business. Of course, everybody knew them for some of their live action and animated shorts and features, but documentaries was a big part of Disney's operational business in this time period. The old cap gun, still shooting daily. Even though these aren't animatronics, they're more mechanical set pieces, it did give the idea that at Disneyland, anything was possible. And you could go to places you never dreamed you'd be able to go, and you'd be able to see animals, attack your boat in a safe way. Like they were really bringing a lot into this attraction. When you look at it from above, you really get the idea of how important the entryway was without everything else surrounding it. You also can actually see down to the river. And if you look at it from over top tonight, it's so overgrown that it's hard to actually see the footprint. But you do see, as I was talking about, that there are 2 islands that you actually loop around to make it feel so adventurous. Now, which one's actually Catalina and which one's Manhattan? Don't ask me. I have no idea. It is interesting seeing this version of the Jungle Cruise, though, where it's not so overgrown, and it definitely looks more like a river and less like a jungle. But what an impressive opening day attraction. And to keep in mind that Disneyland and, of course, Adventureland and the Jungle Cruise all built inside of 1 year. So to landscape this, to build the pathway, fill it with water, put the boats in, create the animals, this was a serious undertaking. And sure, I'm an adult. I take showers all the time, so I see the backside of water every single day. Well, most days if I'm being honest. But I still can appreciate that this attraction is there for people that have never been and for people that really want to dial into the nostalgia of what was storytelling, what was show making, what were attractions like that were built 65 years ago. Just the sheer volume of footage that exists of the Jungle Cruise from the 50s goes to show its cultural relevance and how when people went to Disneyland, they want to document that they went on the Jungle Cruise. I believe these boats are slightly different than the boats that we have today. The boats would be updated in 1997. And something to keep in mind is that a lot of the trees inside of the Jungle Cruise are the very first things ever planted, ever put in Disneyland. In fact, all of the trees on the eastern side of the attraction, those were some of the first things ever put in because they needed to create a windbreak so that as they were working on Main Street USA, that the wind in this open orchard wouldn't blow down Main Street's construction as they were in the middle of putting it together. Sure, it may feel a little dated to our time, and it might not feel like the most exciting attraction, and it's not one that I ride a lot, but I'm very, very happy that it's still there and it still brings us an experience, and I feel like this is an attraction that will always, always be a part of Disneyland. It's an untouchable in my mind. And I'm sure over the next couple of years, we'll see some of it get edited out and we'll see it adapt to the times that it's created in. But fundamentally, I believe that there will still be skippers and boats taking cruises through the jungle every single day for the future of Disneyland. I can't imagine it ever going away. You can see this boat has more of like a tropical type vibe, whereas today's boats, they went a little bit more rustic. They look a little bit more wooden, a little bit more like a boat that's going out for a true adventure. Next up, we're going to go into Frontierland, one of the opening day lands going back to America's frontier. You got to keep in mind, in this moment in time, Westerns were such a big part of culture. To be able to live, to walk inside of a Western was probably a huge deal for folks. But Frontierland really, it had a different kind of vibe to it. They were using a lot of extra land. Frontierland has been probably one of the most edited lands over the years of Disneyland, as they would keep cutting up some of that land and using it for different things. But if you think about Disneyland going from left to right, Frontierland is America's beginning. Main Street USA was sort of a call to a fancier, a more nostalgic modern time. And Tomorrowland was the future. So Disneyland almost existed as a timeline from left to right of America's past, present, and future. The old gun shop. Don't have a gun shop anymore. But Frontierland actually had room for stagecoach rides, pony rides, horse rides. If you go into the Opera House and you look at the original map of Disneyland, you see how much Frontier actually was in Frontierland. And it was actually accurately named, and that they had a lot of extra space back then that they just used to take people out on adventures. Who's that guy? What's he talking about? As the park would grow, that would slowly all get cut up. And now Frontierland is a pretty modest land with really one attraction in it, which is Big Thunder Mountain. Now, the Rivers of America was pretty barren back then. You wouldn't have a lot to go around, but it probably just felt great to be on the Mark Twain, going around a river. That was a pretty un-California type adventure. Here you can see that the berm and everything, it was pretty scaled back in its opening days. Nothing like what we experience today. But the Mark Twain, class of 1955, still making its laps daily, still taking people probably on their first ever riverboat cruise. Hey citizens of Disneyland, I hope you enjoyed today's video. You can find other installments of this series looking back 65 years at the class of 1955, what Disneyland was like in its origin. By all means, if you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, share, follow the channel. All of these things help me justify this insane amount of time that I put into making these. And if you want to hang out with me any Friday, I do a Twitch Disneyland live stream, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Disneyland time, of course, each and every Friday. And don't forget, you can find me every Wednesday over on the podcast, Disneyland For Designers. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope to see you real soon, either here or at Disneyland.